This movie has action, suspense, and a twist that will keep you hooked till the very end. The Last Witch Hunter is a story filled with action and magic, so let's get started. When the man exhaled, a mysterious symbol suddenly appeared on the window. He immediately realized that the stormy weather outside the plane was magical. The power had made it even more intense. If a solution wasn't found soon, a major disaster could happen. But even after seeing this scene, he didn't panic at all. Instead, he took a staple out of a magazine, broke it, and dropped it into a glass of water. Then, getting up quickly, he used the direction indicated by the staple to soon find the real culprit. However, the girl had no idea how dangerous the weather symbol she had was. Especially at an altitude of 10,000 meters, where as soon as it comes into contact with the cold, damp air, it immediately activates inside the gem and can create such a fierce storm that the entire plane could be destroyed. In fact, as soon as the conversation ended, lightning began to crackle all around. It was as if the terrifying gusts of wind would shatter the plane right then and there. The violent jolts forced the passengers in panic to put on their oxygen masks. But Old Van remained calm. He sprinkled desiccant drying powder onto the gem. Then, using tweezers, he carefully separated that mark. In his spare moments, he also reassured the child sitting in the seat ahead with a glance, letting him know there was no need to be afraid. As soon as the effect of the mark wore off, the weather outside immediately cleared up and the plane was out of danger. But Old Van remained just as calm, as if nothing had happened at all. It's hard to imagine that his calmness actually comes from thousands of years of experience and discipline. In fact, 800 years ago, the continent of Europe was under the cruel rule of the witches. At that time, Old Van hid in the Pando Mountains and unleashed the plague, which claimed countless lives. The Brotherhood's warriors, filled with rage, crossed the mountains and reached his hideout. Their goal was to eradicate the root of that evil once and for all. Inside the cave, there was dampness and webs everywhere. But the hunting party fearlessly made their way through the path of death. Sensing their intentions, the Witch Queen revealed her true form and issued a threat. But one warrior hurled his axe and nearly killed her right there. Old Van had just tried to pull out the axe when a curse entered his body through the wound and shattered his mental strength. After that, countless wasps began to pour out of her mouth, making everyone's vision blurry. People started waving spices to dispel the darkness. But in the meantime, hidden demons launched an attack. Even the armored warriors could not escape the effects of the black magic. Amidst the screams, Old Van drew his weapon and moved forward. He recited a sacred chant in the name of steel and fire and performed the witch shout, which permanently changed the situation. But reaching the Witch Queen was not easy. Demons kept coming out continuously to protect her. Old Man realized that unless he killed the Witch Queen, all sacrifices would be in vain. After a fierce battle, as he moved forward, he found his deceased daughter's toy lying on the ground. He picked it up. As soon as he picked it up, he heard his daughter's voice in his ears. He knew this was an illusion created by the Witch Queen. But to find a moment of peace, he closed his eyes. Suddenly, the Witch Queen attacked him and he fell into a deep ravine. The Witch Queen said that humans are multiplying like rats, like madmen, and are destroying the earth. That's why she wants to wipe out humanity by bringing a plague. She summoned the milk of death and tried to push Old Van into hell. But Old Van saw the tar pitch nearby and, with all his strength, unleashed a flamethrower. Was activated. The entire cave was engulfed in flames. The Witch Queen was terrified. Old Van took advantage of the moment, attacked her, tied her to a tree, and recited the sacred chant. But as she was dying, the Witch Queen cursed Old Van. "I curse thee that thou shalt never know peace to walk the eternal loneliness for eternity." That is, he would forever bear the pain of losing his loved ones and would never find peace, Pando. The mountain turned to ash and the remaining witches were forced to make a peace treaty with the humans. They were strictly forbidden from using magic on them, but all agreements are fragile. Some traitors wanted to bring back the Age of Darkness. That's why Old Van had to become a witch hunter and, under the guidance of the church, became the protector of peace. 800 years passed. His 36th butler, Alfred, had grown old and wanted to retire. Old Van had grown accustomed to his companions growing old. He gave Alfred an old ring as a farewell gift. Alfred handed over the new responsibility to Frodo and explained to him that he should see Old Van not as a weapon, but as a friend. But as Frodo was leaving Alfred's house in the rain, a terrifying shadow suddenly appeared. The next morning, Old Van received the news of Alfred's death. He realized that something was wrong. He went to Alfred's place with Frodo to look for clues. Despite the investigation, there was no sign of magic there. But seeing the bodies of 3 flies on the ground made him suspicious. Old Van threw magical powder and the hidden pentagram spell was broken. He realized that Alfred was not ordinary. There he found materials for black magic, which could only be obtained from Max, a black market dealer. When Old Van reached Max, Max got scared and tried to run away. But who could escape from an 800-year-old witch hunter? In the end, Max confessed, and following the clues, Old Van reached a dilapidated hut. There, he found an innocent-looking little girl. He wanted to take her outside, but suddenly, a cold glint appeared in her eyes. Old Van was attacked. He was injured, but during his investigation, he found Alfred's glass. So Max was caught and handed over to the church. But Frodo didn't give that man any chance to speak at all. Instead, he directly threw him into the dungeon and handed him over to the Witch Council. Upon seeing these traitors who had made a peace pact with humans, the Dark Sorcerer went mad with rage. He said that his ancestors had served the Witch Queen hundreds of years ago. He would never recognize the power of the council, nor would he care about their laws. But Old Van's pen was present as evidence. So, without wasting any time, the elders immediately drew the tarot cards and the prophecy revealed that he is the one who killed Alfred. Old Van objected. "These cards are wrong. You used a strange-shaped stone. I've never seen craftsmanship like this before. That's something from the time of the Witch Queen." But the chairman didn't listen to him at all. Instead, he took out a centipede-shaped date locket from around his neck, woke up the sleeping guard inside it, and, out of necessity, had the man arrested and imprisoned beneath the church's foundation. Meanwhile, Old Van noticed a familiar insect on the chairman's shoulder. He became suspicious and went straight to the morgue. He opened Alfred's coffin and drew symbols on a magical candle with his tools. After a brief procedure, he discovered that Alfred was not actually dead, but was in a state of false death due to a curse. To be sure, Old Van lifted the priest's collar. From there, he saw a dark magical shadow emerging from his throat. He grabbed it and crushed it, causing the priest's face to turn pale instantly. Old Van recognized that this was a dark magic from the 13th century. When the magician was killed in a short time, only then did the priest notice a cut on his finger, as if he was trying to send him a message. Old Van picked up his books and added bloodstains to every page. By combining those words, a sentence was formed. Actually, 800 years ago, Old Van tried to capture the Flame Soul and die together with the Witch Queen. But after dying, he was cursed and became immortal. As time passed, those events became blurry. To uncover the truth, he went into a trance where a magical potion was meant to revive his memories. But the witch hunter, who had already lived for 1,000 years, had such a notorious reputation that no one wanted to mess with him. Even Chloe, the owner of the bar, wanted to throw him out. But Old Van tempted her with money and promised to compensate for all the damages. Reluctantly, Chloe agreed and prepared the memory-restoring potion. She injected the potion into a cherry with a syringe and handed it to Old Van. Surprisingly, Old Van ate it without any hesitation. Chloe found it amusing and took out her phone, wanting to take a selfie with him. But Old Van was already prepared and warned her not to joke around. As soon as Old Van ate the potion, his memories began to awaken. He saw himself in a snowy valley attacking the Witch Queen's fortress with his companions. All 11 of his companions were martyred. In the end, Old Van killed the Witch Queen, but Alfred wanted him to see something more. At that moment, a stranger emerged from the fire. Old Van writhed in pain and suddenly returned to reality. There he came face to face with the real culprit who had cursed Alfred. He pinned Old Van to the ground and completely destroyed the bar. Old Van broke his own arm to free himself, because his Amrita cured him instantly. He punched and knocked down the enemy. But that enemy was an expert in magic. He recited a spell and created a shield, pushing Old Van into the illusion again. The old man became helpless. Someone came running and brought him an antidote. She told Old Van to breathe, and he returned to reality. But by then, the enemy had already escaped. Chloe, angry and upset, left Old Van behind. At home, while drinking, he saw a shadow in the bottle's glass. Lights flickered, and Belle came out and started tying him up. She felt like Old Van was calling her, and she snapped out of the illusion. Chloe realized that the enemy was targeting everyone connected to Old Van. In the end, she decided to support Old Van. But when the two of them reached the herbal warehouse, all the supplies had been destroyed and Chloe's friend had been brutally killed. Hearing the enemy's laughter on the phone, Chloe vowed to take revenge with Old Van. The two of them reached another Vic nest. There, the Vic leader gave them herbs for the medicine, but Chloe noticed something wrong in the soil. Before she could warn him, the leader released a magical smoke that trapped Old Van in memories of his wife and daughter. If Chloe hadn't arrived in time, Old Van would have been lost in the illusion forever. Chloe killed all the guards and discovered the real truth. The magical plants were boreal veer, which are used in black magic. Old Van snatched the leader's blue gem, which made her panic and start begging for mercy. She said that the bearded man, Bird Wizard, is the one who gives all the orders. Old Van felt there was a deep conspiracy in this, so he left. But Chloe was furious, and she wasn't going to spare the enemy. In Chloe's heart, there was both love and hatred for Old Van. That's why she wasn't going to let him go so easily. However, on this journey, she didn't get the answers she truly wanted. But Old Van accidentally discovered that Chloe was actually a dreamwalker, meaning she could freely enter and exit other people's dreams and illusions. If he uses his innate power, Old Van won't need memory nourishment at all. He can directly see the truth after death and expose Big Bed's conspiracy. Even though the witches tried their best to keep Dean Hunter from learning the truth, with the help of dreamwalker Chloe, Old Van once again returned to Mount Pandora 800 years ago. Like a spectator, he gradually uncovered the secret hidden in his memories. In fact, at that time, everyone thought that Old Van had sacrificed himself while killing the Witch Queen. But when the priest drew out the flaming sword and thought it was all over, suddenly, Old Van came back to life from the burnt ashes. He stopped his panicked companions and saw that the Witch Queen's heart was still beating in the ashes. The priest struck the heart with his sword, and Old Van screamed in pain. This proved that a mysterious link had been formed between Old Van and the Witch Queen. Because of this, he gained mortality. It was a chance to destroy the Witch Queen forever. But out of greed, the priest hid the heart and turned Old into a weapon of the church. It was over. The Queen was dead. When Old Van learned the truth, he was completely shattered. Now he understood why Bigby had cursed Alfred. In reality, by getting the heart back, he wanted to revive the Witch Queen. Old Van immediately rushed to the cemetery to stop the Witch Queen before the ritual could be completed. But just then, he heard Lo's voice from behind. It had been a long time. Suddenly, Big Bad shapeshifted and attacked Old Van. Shots were fired, but due to his immortality, Old Van survived, and in the end, he killed Big Bad. Alfred's staff also broke, but just then, the Witch Queen, trapped in the tree, attacked and snatched away Old Van's immortality. Immortality and never mind. In fact, it was the Queen who had given Old Van the task of safeguarding her immortality for 800 years, so that when the revival ritual was completed, that power would return to her. Now Old Van had become an ordinary human. The Witch Queen was freed and returned to the world. Old Van was badly injured, but he did not give up. He crawled to the shotgun and fought back, but now it had no effect. The Witch Queen deliberately left Old Van alive so that he could witness it with his own eyes. How humanity would once again be wiped out. There was only one relief for Old Van. Big B was dead and Alfred's curse had been broken. But Alfred had warned him that the Queen might still spread her influence. But Old Van had imprisoned millions of black witches over the past 800 years. If their powers merged with the Witch Queen, all of humanity could be destroyed. Now Old Van was human. Even so, he gathered his courage in memory of his family. He picked up his weapons and set out for the final battle. Meanwhile, Chloe had come to fully trust Old Van and joined his team. The new priest Frodo was also with them. They all reached the witch press beneath the church, but there were no prisoners to be seen. Old Van threw nourishment and broke the seal. At that moment, Chloe realized that the souls of all the prisoners were sealed within the church walls. Now, at the Witch Queen's summons, they were all chanting incantations so that the ritual could begin. Old Van broke the stone with a secret noise and pulled one prisoner out. With the power of the Dreamwalker, Chloe had to destroy that prisoner's consciousness to stop the ritual. But as soon as the prisoner came out, the spider sentinels were activated. Old Van charged at them and finally found their weakness, destroying them. Meanwhile, Chloe entered the illusion world, defeated the enemy, and broke the ritual. In anger, the Witch Queen pulled Old Van into an illusion. Old Van counterattacked with a flaming sword. Although he was no longer immortal, his 800 years of battle experience was his strength.